Here. I'm Scott Bradner. I've been doing these introductions for a while. I think about a dozen years, I think, getting on there. I was on the ISG for a while, and you hear what the ISG is. Working group chair in the past and currently. Was on the ISOC board and secretary of the ISOC board now, and you'll hear about all of those different organizations as we go along. So the agenda is we'll look at a little bit of history, where the IETF came from, what's its purpose, how things get done, and what you'll see this week, how you'll actually interact with the IETF standards process, a little bit of what's going on, specific things you might be interested in. What's the role of the IETF in this standards arena, the scope of it, how is it structured, its working groups and areas and things like that, and talk about all those things. How do we select our management? When I first started in the IETF, the management was it was appointed. The chair appointed the different members of the different committees. That's no longer the case. There's a nominations process and volunteers and things. We'll talk about that. And then some process and procedure things, how actually things get approved, and then a little bit about intellectual property rights, not because they're wonderful things, but because you have to deal with them. So what is the IETF? Internet Engineering Task Force. It was formed in 1986 out of a series of, that's the latest incarnation of a series of US government efforts to advance the TCP/IP protocol, which had been adopted in 1983 for the ARPANET. They needed a way to progress the standards, to progress the technology, and the US government formed these task forces and these different activities to do that. The last one in the series was the IETF. In parallel was the IRTF, Internet Research Task Force, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. There was a series of things paid for by the US government, but mostly volunteers. The meeting expenses were paid by the government. The US government no longer pays for anything here. The IETF has been completely self-sufficient since 1997, and that's a good thing, because we're not dependent on any government activities. We do get a great deal of support from the Internet Society. We'll talk about that in a bit. For a very long time, Internet standards were considered completely irrelevant to anything anybody cared about. They cared about telephones, and they cared about TV and things like that, and the Internet had nothing to do with those. And that was wonderful. Because we were ignored, because the standards process was ignored, we didn't have governments telling us how best to do things, or how to do things that didn't disrupt existing businesses, then we could do what we thought was best. Could make the best technology we could, rather than the technology that was driven by government actions or regulatory actions. We're not government approved. The IETF has no formal government roles. We'll talk more about that sort of thing in a few minutes. We did have funding, but we don't have any more. This is a quote from Dave Clark in 1992. 1992 was a seminal year, an important year in the history of the IETF, because it was when the IETF reformed itself. Before 1992, the membership in the leadership committees was appointed, and it was all done by individual chairs of the committees deciding who should be on the committee. And the main committee at the time was the IAB, the Internet Activities Board, it was called those days. And they were the standards approval body. They were the people who decided what was going to be a standard and what was not. Well, they got a little bit big for their britches. They did things which the community thought was wrong. They changed standards after a working group was done with it, and they proclaimed the future of the Internet was the OSI protocol suite. And neither of those went down particularly well. So the populace in the IETF rebelled, formed a working group to revise the entire IETF and restructure it entirely, and it did. 1992 was when that took hold, and this was Dave Clark, who at the time was on the IAB. It was part of his talk on how we're changing things. We don't believe in presidents, so therefore nobody is appointing the membership. We don't believe in voting because you don't have a membership. We don't have a membership of the IETF. You didn't have to sign any membership agreement to come here. You don't have to sign any membership agreement to be on the mailing list. The IETF has participants. We don't have members. And if you don't have members, then you can't do voting because you don't have any idea who the constituency is. We do have ways to judge consensus, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So we don't believe in kings, hereditary rule, presidents electing leaders, or voting because we can't define a constituency. But we do believe in rough consensus and running code. And I'll talk about both of those things in a bit. As I said, the IETF is made up of individual participants. You participate and you're judged on your participation, not who you work for. If you get up at the microphone and say, I'm from Cisco and Cisco thinks, you'll be laughed at, literally, because everybody knows that corporations don't think. Cisco doesn't think. The people in Cisco think. And we want to know what those people think and what they do, what their opinion is about the technology and their opinion is about the process. So don't say who you're from. Sometimes you do just for it's on your badge so people know generally what you're up to. But it's not, you're not up there to spout the company line. Some of you will because that's what your bosses want you to do. But we want to know your opinion. We want to know how, because we believe that you're the bright ones here, going to do things usefully. This makes things difficult in other areas. One of the areas that makes things difficult for is governments wanting to have input to the standards process or other standards organizations, W3C, ITU, ETSI, any of those other standards organizations. They come and say, here's our standard. It's a great thing. You should just agree to it. And we say, well, okay, let's evaluate it as if it was from an individual. And that doesn't go sit so well with governments. They don't believe they're individuals. They believe they're big, powerful things called governments. And so there's a tension in there. But we think it's a healthy tension because we're judging the actual input on its merits, not on its pedigree, not where it came from, but on its merits, on the merits of the proposal itself. So it's the technical argument and the person making that technical argument that makes a difference. If you look at documents, sometimes in many standards bodies, you'll see dozen companies represented by the people who are authors of the document. That doesn't cut water here. It doesn't make any difference. Getting extra people to co-author your document or an internet draft or RFC from different companies to show the breadth of support doesn't make any difference. What makes a difference is the quality of the work. So I repeat that because it's a very important thing. If you're here from another standards organization, we value your input, but we value your input, not the standards organization's input. We will look at it, understand that it's from a concerned and considered opinion from another body, but in the end, we have to look at it for its technical merits. So what is the IETF about? We do internet standards. We do the middle internet standards. We don't do the standards for wires, though I'll get into that in a minute. We sort of do the standards for wires. And we don't do the page description. We don't say how you put things on the screen. We generally don't tell you how to do a user interface. That's others, people do. W3C does how you put stuff on screens. IEEE does wires like Ethernet, or wireless like 802, 802.11. We do the stuff in the middle, the stuff that makes the world work, the communications control itself. So almost all of the standards that make up the internet transport, the internet infrastructure, the internet middleware, are standards that either originated with the IETF or are maintained by the IETF. TCP/IP predates the IETF, but we maintain it. We've created all of the routing protocols that hold things together, the domain name system, the technology behind that, that's all IETF work. So that's all our space in here. But we don't exist. There is no legal entity called the Internet Engineering Task Force or the IETF. It is a collaboration of people getting together. It's an organized activity of the Internet Society. Now, it existed before the Internet Society did. We'll talk about that. But it's now the Internet Society is sort of our home, but we don't have a legal existence itself. Now, this has been a little funky when they want the chair of the IETF to sign a document, except that's just an individual signing because there's no actual organization behind him. So we had a number of years where groups like the ITU refused to have the IETF chair sign things because he didn't represent anything. And then somebody from the Internet Society had to sign. That was a little funky, and it's gone away because most people believe the IETF, whether it exists or not, is kind of an important voice. We get 1,000 to 1,500 people at a meeting. We'll have something around, there were about 1,300 pre-registered for this meeting. Not sure how many will actually show up. There were 1,100 and some odd actually paid as of yesterday afternoon. So there will probably be 1,200, 1,300 people here. Many, 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 many more on mailing lists. You don't have to come to an IETF meeting to fully participate in the IETF. You can do it entirely on mailing lists. They're completely free, they're completely open, and you can do that. But if you come here, it's valuable because you get to talk to people in the corridors and see how the sausage is made. You see how things are actually put together. So here's a picture of our attendance. We did pretty good in the internet boom. If you just spelled IP, then the stock market ran after you. But it failed, and we dropped down considerably. But as you can see, it's pretty stable in the 1,000 to 1,500 range since the mid-2000s. We've been very stable in this area. Bounce up, bounce down, but that's basically what it is. So what's our purpose? Our purpose is to develop and maintain standards for internet-related technologies. We don't generally do standards for technologies that are only used in a narrow space, let's say a home. We do some stuff in homes, but only the things which are connected to the internet. We leave the within the home kind of standards, AV standards and things to others. We worry about things where the source of the data is on the internet someplace, the destination of the data is on the internet someplace, and we're communicating between them. We want to ensure that the technology that's developed through the working group process actually meets the needs that people have. Now that's actually kind of a surprise in some environments. Many standards bodies develop standards based on what their standards participants think they want to do, rather than what the actual market need is. And we certainly do that. We're disjointed from the market sometimes. We're disjointed from the actual needs of the community. We're trying not to do that, but it does happen. So our attempt is to make it relevant. We want to make sure that it actually works at internet scale. The internet is one of those things that if you have a success, you can go from 10 people looking at your website to 20 million in 5 hours. And that's a big job to make sure things work and that kind of ramp up. And then 10 hours after that, you got 20 million and 50 million. And there's 800 million people on the net today. The avalanche effect is huge. Everything that's being done for the internet has to work at huge scale. Very, very many simultaneous sessions and a lot of data. And that's very hard to do. It's hard to engineer that, to do it that sort of thing. We want it to be secure, particularly these days, with all of the spying and observation by governments and by third parties such as ad agencies and Google and the like. We want things to be secure. We want all of our IETF protocols have to understand the level of security they've got and make the security as strong as possible, yet something that can actually be used. We don't have secure email because we don't know how to do that yet. Yes, there is secure email, but it's not generally available because people don't know how to scale that so that you and I can actually find each other in a secure way and then communicate in a secure way. We don't know how to do that yet. But we're trying. We keep trying, and others are trying it too. We want to make sure that you can actually manage it after it's been deployed. That's sometimes not the case. Management has got to be considered up front. And we produce standards, and we produce other documents too. But what's a standard? Many years ago, when the ITU, International Telecommunications Union, was first recognizing there was this internet thing out there They didn't know quite what it was, but there was this internet thing and they needed to know a bit more about it. I was the liaison to the ITU from the IETF. And I went over there and to Geneva, and Brian Carpenter, who was then the chair of the IEB, and I gave a presentation to the ITU about what the IETF was. It was an earlier version of this same presentation. The first question we were asked when we were done our presentation was, how can you call your things standards if no government mandates their use? Well, that's a different way of looking at things. Our things are standards because people want to use them. It's a standard way to do something. It is not a mandatory standard. They're all voluntary standards. There's no protocol police out there to tell you how you have to work it. It is a completely voluntary thing. We have lots and lots of documents we call standards that nobody uses. We think it's the best way to do that particular function, and it's a standard way to do that function, but nobody uses them because they don't agree that it's useful. Well, that's fine. We also have a lot of standards which a lot of people use. Effectively, all of the web traffic, all of the voice over IP, all the streaming, all that kind of stuff is all IETF standards. So we do standards and we define a standard as the things that people use. We define those standards are published as RFCs. We'll talk about RFCs in a bit, but it used to be that RFCs stood for request for comment. They haven't stood for that for many years. By the time they get to be an RFC, it's too late to comment on them. Because that's the end point, that's our archival publication series. That's where the final definition is published. So when you see a news article saying it's an RFC and then they put in parentheses request for comments, you know the person isn't really up to date as to how the IETF works. An RFC is an RFC. It's a brand name. It's not an acronym for something else. We don't have any kind of formal approval. We don't pass our standards on to somebody else to second guess them. We just publish them. And if you want to use them, use them. They're available for free. We don't care. We have people who bundle together RFCs and sell them as books. That's great. We don't ask for any royalties. We just let people do that because we believe to get that information out there. The fact that we don't have any way for governments or other organizations to have formal input is a problem. It's a known problem, but so far, any cure for that is worse than the disease. I saw waiting in line for getting my badge this morning. Two people in front of me was from the FBI, US Federal Bureau of Investigation. He comes to a lot of these meetings, good guy. He can stand up at the microphone and express his opinion, and it's his opinion. We treat it as his opinion. It is not the opinion of the FBI or the US government. It's his opinion. But that bothers a lot of folks, particularly a lot of governments who, when the IETF builds a technology that disrupts their economic sphere. Voice over IP completely blew away a lot of telephone revenue for a lot of governments. And this is a big deal. And our designs for voice over IP didn't have a way to bill for it. Now it's been added back in there, but if we had government input and government control on this, that would have never happened. We'd have had to, from the beginning, build in ways to do surveillance and to do billing. We do control. We don't do that. So we don't do anything with traditional standards bodies. We're our own group. The work in the IETF is done in working groups. It's how we actually do work. At the time I made up the slide, I revised these slides about 2 weeks ago. There are 136 working groups that were active. There may have been one that's been added and one that's subtracted, been terminated since then, I don't know, but it's in that general range. Each working group has 1 or 2 chairs, sometimes 3 chairs, and they manage the activity within the working group. The working groups are collected together into areas, and that's for managerial efficiency. Within the working group, there's also a document editor for each of the documents that's being worked on. Working group can be working on a single document or a dozen documents. It's just they'd be working on multiple things, multiple documents to describe the same technology or documents to describe different technologies. The working groups are collected into areas for, as I say, managerial efficiency. The area divisions are somewhat capricious. There's not a hard boundary. When I was an area director, I had working groups in my area that were clearly better in the applications area, but the area director in applications doesn't particularly care for the technology. I did. So we formed a working group in my area, the transport area. It went back and forth that way. So it's not a very strict boundary, but it is it's efficient. And for each of the areas has area directors who are involved in the creation of working groups and the management of them to be sure they're doing the right things. The area directors sitting together as a body, along with the IETF chair, form the Internet Engineering Steering Group, the IESG. The IESG took over from the IAB as the standards approval body for the IETF. You send a proposal up as an individual or a working group, mostly through working groups. You send those proposals to the IESG evaluates and decides if that's going to be published as a standard, as anything on the RFC series. Though there's some exceptions, we'll talk about that. So the IESG is the major control point. The Internet Activities Board was renamed the Internet Architecture Board earlier in 1992. It wasn't part of the same change, but it was in that same time frame. And they provide overall architectural guidance to the IETF, and they manage the external liaisons to other organizations. There's these are the areas. The applications in real-time area is recent. It used to be two separate areas, and they merged together. When I was area director, they merged two areas, the operations area and the management area together to form one area, and then they split some things apart, and so these areas are come and go. At the moment, these are the ones that are there, with the numbers of working groups in each one. The general area is under the area director for the general area is the IETF chair. And that is the area which is concerned with overall IETF activities like intellectual property rights or standards, processes, documents, and things like that. So I said each area has a few area directors. The general area just has one, which is the IETF chair. The other areas have 2 or 3 area directors, and they're responsible for figuring out how the general area works, how the area as overall works. If it's the routing area, well, what routing protocols are we going to work on? Where are the hot button issues? Where are the things that need to be additional work? Work with the community to develop working groups and make sure the working groups are doing their job. Area directors also set up birds of a feather sessions, which is how new work comes in, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Make sure that the working group chairs are doing the right thing, doing the proper kind of determination of consensus, not browbeating people, but actually inviting the right kind of critique and involvement. They help create working groups sometimes from birds of a feather sessions, sometimes separately. They can change working group management. All of that is under the control of the area directors. And if you're in a working group and your working group gets done with a document, they think it's ready for publication as an RFC, as a standard, you hand it to your area director. The area director has a responsibility to review that document and to be sure that the area director thinks it's ready for publication. If the area director doesn't, it sends it back to the working group for more work. When the area director thinks it's ready, it hands it off to the IESG. And the IESG, as I said, is the collection of area directors plus the IETF chair, and they're the decision body. They do an independent technical review of any proposal that comes up for RFC. This is different than most standards bodies. Most standards bodies, the technical work is done at the working group level, whether it's called a working party or working group or rapporteurs group, or the different standards bodies call them different things, but it's done at the lower level. And the only thing that's done at the higher levels is process. Was the correct process followed? The people at the higher levels aren't necessarily technologists. The IETF, the IESG are technologists. They're chosen for their technical capabilities. And some of them are chosen more for their technical capabilities than their social graces, but still their technical capabilities. So when a proposal comes up, they review it. The security area directors will review for security issues. Transport area directors will review for congestion control and friendliness on the net. The operations and management area directors will review it to make sure it's manageable, that sort of thing. It can be quite a shock because the working group sends up a document, but there was nobody on the working group that knew anything about management. When it gets up to the ISG, they said, you didn't do anything about management. You can't actually run this thing. And they sent it back down for more work. So it can be brutal to the working group to find out late in the game that they need to do some additional work. But we think it makes for better standards. Ones where it's not just a small clique that has come up with the proposal and it's just pushed through. This is something where it's been reviewed, deeply reviewed. The ISG said of the manager of the IETF. So how does actually technology get developed? Let's say you have this wonderful idea for a new protocol, a pinochle playing protocol. And it's just, everybody's going to want it because it's just the right thing. You would normally try to set up a working group. And you do that by getting some friends, pinochle players, together to create this working group. And you go to an area director and say, we've got this great technology, all of us are interested in it, and we want to do something with it. The area director may set up a birds and feathers session, may just create a working group if the area director is convinced, with the ISG is convinced. Then you start working on it and you create an internet draft. Usually you create the internet draft early on, but before you actually get to being a birds and feathers session, it's part of the process of defining what you're being worked on. You create an internet draft, you work on it, you iterate it, you change it again and again and again and again until the working group is satisfied with it, kick it up to the area director. The area director looks at it and says, you forgot this, goes back to the working group iterates the document again, so with new versions of the document. When the area director is satisfied, it goes to the ISG, which may push back and say more work is needed. So you keep going through these iterations of internet drafts to get to the point where something's actually published. The internet draft is the document that replaced what the early RFCs were. The very early RFCs were requests for comments. You'd publish something and say, what do you think? And somebody else would publish another RFC saying what they thought. Well, that got to be too much of a burden on the RFC publisher, really. That it became something that wanted to be done within the IETF and within the IETF working group level. So the internet drafts were created. The concept of internet drafts were created. Anybody can produce an internet draft, and it's the mechanism by which the working group documents its deliberations. And they are really the requests for comments, the internet drafts. When it's finally done, it gets published as an RFC after the ISG has approved it and after the community has had a chance to talk about it. We'll talk about that. So, as I said, when the area director is satisfied, sends it to the ISG. At that point, the ISG issues what is called a last call for comments. And that goes to the entire IETF community. It's not just the working group. It's not, if it's a routing document, it doesn't just go to the routing area, it goes to everybody. And it actually goes outside the IETF as well. The IETF maintains a mailing list called New Work, which is specifically set up so that representatives from other standards bodies can subscribe to that list and find out what new working groups the IETF is working on and what documents are up for evaluation. So we can get comments in from W3C or ETSI or IEEE. They all get told when a document is being up for review. So ISG, the first thing ISG does is send out this last call, collects comments from the community about the document. Doesn't have to be technology, it could be process, or it could just be informational. Then the ISG takes those comments, reviews the document themselves. If they're not satisfied, sends it back to the working group. If they are satisfied, tells the RFC editor to publish it as an RFC. That's the general process. It's not the only process. We'll get to that in a second. Many times, but not always, before a working group is created, a birds of a feather session is held. Birds of a feather session is mostly used by an area director to figure out whether there's enough worker bees, enough people who are interested in the topic and knowledgeable enough about the topic to actually do something. You can't just have one person working on something because you don't develop a well-rounded and mature standard from one person. Well, you might from John Postel when he was around, but not very many other people can do it. So it's a birds of a feather session is a way for the area director to figure out whether it's ripe for a working group. Not always. Sometimes the birds of a feather session is simply for information. When I was area director, we did a birds of a feather session on quality for the internet. And we asked people from all over the place, from FedEx and from big banks and other folks to come in and say what they would like out of the internet if they could say how the internet worked. And all of them said they wanted predictability. This is not really about the history of the internet, but this was, I thought, an interesting thing. The guy from FedEx, FedEx as a company specializes in giving different levels of service. Different service than the regular postal service. But what he said, he wanted McDonald's. He wanted the same crappy burger no matter where he went. Every place in the world you get a McDonald's burger, it tastes the same. He wanted predictability. So that was a birds of a feather session that was only there for the information that we got out of that discussion. We created some working groups to work on trying to come up with ways to make the internet more predictable. We didn't, but we tried. But so birds of a feather session could just be for information, or it could be for deciding whether you go to a working group. The area director looks at it and says, no, there's not a consistency here. The people don't know what they're talking about. It's in competition with another working group. It could be lots of different things. And the area director says, okay, that was a one-shot deal. We're not going to do it anymore, and we'll move on to something else. Or they can poll the people in the room and ask, well, what do you think? When I was area director, I had one particular BOF, birds of a feather session. It was about 300 people in the room, which is a big BOF. And at the end of it, it was about breaking up routers into little parts. And at the end of it, I stood up at area director and said, well, okay, how many people in the room think that this should be an IETF working group? And about half the people in the room put up their hands. Now, if you will see as this week, that's very rare that you get that much participation. Most of the time you'll get 5% of the room expressing an opinion. The rest are there to listen. They're not there to participate. They don't understand the documents. They haven't read them. So they're just listening and understanding what's going on, but they don't know enough to express an opinion yet. But then I said, okay, well, how many people, so about half the people said it was ready for being a working group. I said, well, how many people think it shouldn't be a working group? And the other half put their hands up. So I took that as a message saying, no, it's not going to be a working group now because we don't have a message to do that. A few years later, the message had been refined and the proposal had been refined, and it was created a working group. It was working with called Forces, and it did pretty good work. But it took a while to do that. So birds of a feather session is a mechanism by which an area director can judge the maturity of the project or get information to the community. But the basic work area is a working group. A working group is where the basic work is done. There are, say, 136 or something working groups. The working group is mostly worked on mailing list. This week, there are some large number, 100 and some odd sessions, some odd around 90 or so, I think. I've got a slide later on, it says how many working groups that are meeting, but they only meet for between an hour and 2.5 hours. That's not enough time to actually build the technology. That's what we do in the working group meetings and the face-to-face meetings is resolve the higher level issues which have not been resolved in the mailing list. The primary work is on the mailing list. That's why you can fully participate in the IETF without ever coming to an IETF meeting, because you can do it all in the mailing list. But the working group is also one of the things about IETF working groups, it's bottoms up. If you have this great idea for a pinochle playing protocol, you can help create a working group for that. If an area director has a great idea for a chess playing protocol, they can't just go create a working group. Working groups are not created from the top down, they're created from the bottom up. Almost always, 95% of the time, the working groups come from a group of people getting together and saying, this is a technology we want to develop. It's not coming from an area director saying, we have a need for this. Sometimes area director will go out and try and agitate in the community to get people that are interested. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. When I was area director, I did that once, and it worked, but it took a lot of effort to do it. It's very, very rare, almost always from bottoms up. And what that means, though, is that the IETF management, the leadership, can't commit to any activities. So if the ITU says, well, will you develop this technology? The leadership says, I don't know. They don't have a way to cause that to happen, which is the case in other standards bodies. Other standards bodies can say, we're going to form this working party, we're going to form this working group, and here's its charter, and go do things and cause it to happen. Well, we don't do it that way. It's all bottoms up, which makes things a little hard to predict. It's very much on the interest of the community, and you're now part of the community, so it's of your interest. Working groups have charters. The charter is a contract between the working group and the IESG and the IETF as to what they're going to work on. It's exclusionary. You work on what's in the charter, you don't work on things that aren't in the charter. If you go to a working group and say, I think this new thing is going to be great to be done, the working group looks at the charter and says, well, yeah, it may be, but it's not in our charters, we can't do it. So the charters constrain the working group as what they can work on, and they also direct the working group as to what they should work on. So it's both an inclusionary and exclusionary environment. The charters are, the final say on the charter is from the IESG, but generally charters are worked out with the people that are trying to form the working group. They're in the loop on it, but the end game is the IESG approves it. And the working groups generally tend to be folded, closed down after their work's done. That also is something that's different in the IETF for some standards bodies. I had one working group chair who I said, great job, you got it all done, all of the documents published as RFCs, so we're calling it a standard working group. And he got all upset because he thought I was insulting him. Because in the standards body he was normally working in, when he got his work done, they give him more work to do. Because the role of a working group chair was an honorable role. And it added to his status to be a working group chair. And because he got his job done, we said, okay, you're done, go away. He didn't like that. But that's a part of our culture, is to do that. Now, as you can tell by the number of working groups, they don't all fade away quickly. There are some working groups here that were around when I first started in the IETF in 1990. There are a few working groups that are still here from then. And the working group that I formed in 1991, Benchmarking Methodology Working Group, is still meeting and is meeting this week. They're still getting stuff done, though. Here's a picture. For the verbally handicapped, here's a picture of how this all works. You might have a boss. You have the figure out who the chairs are, come up with the description, some goals for the working group, a charter for the working group. That goes to an area director. If an area director agrees, back and forth between the area director to create the final charter, then that goes to the ISG. The ISG asks the IAB for their advice, also sends out to New Work saying, and to the IFT community, saying we may be creating this new working group. What do you think? We've gotten messages back from other standards bodies saying, we're already working in that area. Why don't you just use our stuff when it's done? Mostly we sometimes agree to that and sometimes not. It really depends on the particular case. So as I said, the working group meetings in the IETF face-to-face are only temporary. They're short. So the primary work has to be done on a mailing list. So here's the actual session is for these high order bits, the things that didn't get resolved in the mailing list. So you're going to be going to working groups, I trust. That's why you're here. We're going to some working group meetings. We want you to participate if you have something to say. Don't want you to participate if you don't have anything to say other than wanting to hear the sound of your own voice. We want you to think about things. So before you speak, read the documents. So the agendas have the list of documents to be worked on. So read the documents. But if you have something to say, say it. Your input is just as valuable as anybody else's input. Even if the document author may not agree with you, it's still the document author has to obey the consensus of the working group. So get up in there and talk. But when you do talk, and there's microphones in the middle of the room, you can see them here, remember that these sessions are being streamed, audio streamed and video streamed. There's a little camera here, which I'm driving the guy nuts because I'm walking all over the place. But so they're being streamed. So every time you go to the microphone, you say who you are, even if it's only been a minute since you were there before, because the people out there listening to the audio stream don't know. So you say who you are, just your name. You don't have to say who you're from, what company you work for, just your name. But you say it every single time without fail. And please, pretend that you like the microphone. It's amazing how inept technologists are with microphones. You have a microphone. So turn this one off so that, yeah, okay. You're supposed to talk to the microphone like this. You love the microphone. But people do this, or they do this. So they get a question from over here, and they'll talk over here. The microphone's over here. They're listening to your ear. Look at the microphone. Your job is to look at the microphone. The job is to communicate so that people out there in audio land can hear you. It seems to be an extraordinarily hard lesson, but try. Let's see. Oh, yes. We also have blue sheets. You know, we don't have it in this session because it's not a technology session. We have blue sheets in the regular sessions. Part of being an open standards body is to record who's in the room, who's participating in the standards activity. The mailing lists are archived so we can find out who sent what comment. We have the blue sheets, which are literally blue pieces of paper, where you write your name and your affiliation, and you write that down on there. So we have a record of who participated in the standards process. It's very important for openness, and it's all very important for intellectual property rights issues. We need to know who affected a standard along the way. We don't do anything with that, but the courts do. If somebody gets sued for patent infringement in court, one of the details is, well, who was in the room and affecting this? Was it somebody who then took out a patent on the technology being discussed? We need to know that. That's part of the openness. So sign the blue sheet. Don't look through the blue sheet to find out who else is there. Just sign it. Just sign it and pass it on. We used to have email addresses, and we used to publish those as part of the proceedings, but it became very quickly a spam list. So we no longer ask for email addresses. We have many years of blue sheets which are archived in a warehouse in Virginia, that when we get a subpoena, we have to send somebody out to the warehouse to pick them up and look at and scan them. But now, because we're not asked for email address anymore, we just publish them. We scan them and put them online as part of the proceedings. So sign the blue sheets because it's important for the openness process. This week, 123 sessions, 108 of them are unique. There are some working groups that meet more than once. One birds of a feather session, which is rare. It's a much smaller number of birds of a feather sessions than normal. Normally there's 5 or 6. But today, for some reason or other this week, there's only 1. There are 10 IRTF sessions. We'll talk about the IRTF in a bit. There's a plenary. Usually, up until now, there's been 2 plenaries, an administrative plenary and a technical plenary on different days. But this week, in order to conserve time, there's a single plenary. It's on Wednesday in the afternoon. There's a typo in that timing, the second value of the time. And this is a combined operations and technical plenary. There's a bits and bytes section, which is free booze and nibbles amongst vendorware. And it's certainly worth going to because you get free booze and nibbles. And you might find something that's interesting as well. The only BOF this week is internet storage synchronization, and I don't know anything about it. That's one of the features of having 123 working groups, so you don't know most of them. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. One of the types of meetings I find the most interesting, the ones I would suggest that you go to find out what's going on, are the area meetings, the open area meetings. There are a few of them here, the operation management area, routing area, security area, and then there's one for the IRTF. And they sort of generally tell you what's going on in the area, what's the new work that might be going on in the area. And I find them interesting and generally useful as a gauge. You find them in the agenda. So I talked about the fact that I was going to talk about rough consensus and running code. We don't have voting because we can't figure out who's a member because we don't ask for members. And if you don't have membership lists, then you don't know who's eligible to vote. So we don't know how to do that. So we don't do that. So there's two things about rough consensus. One is that it's rough, and the other is that it's arbitrary. Now, I say it's rough because we don't do the consensus like everybody has to agree. Or as Margaret Thatcher is reported to have said, consensus is when everybody is equally dissatisfied. Well, that's not the kind of consensus we worry about. If everybody in the room thinks that your protocol sucks but you, we're moving on. If everybody in the room thinks that feature A is important and you don't, we're moving on. And we're going to move on, and we're not going to satisfy. We want to hear your reasons. We want you to speak up and understand why you don't think this is a good idea or why you think it's a good idea. But in the end, if it's you against the mob, we're going to move on. We're not going to try and satisfy you, which many standards bodies require complete consensus. Requiring consensus means we have to put in some funny little thing that you will allow you to agree to it, which hurts the rest of the protocol. So our protocols tend to be a little simpler because they don't have these bells and whistles to satisfy the squeaky wheels. They're not perfect, but they tend to be a little bit that way. The percentage of the gauge of roughness it varies. Most of the time we're aiming for 80–90% agreement. We're not aiming for 100%. We're not aiming for 51%. If you do 51%, you're going to have a bad protocol. If 49% of the people think this is wrong thing to do, there's probably some smoke behind that, some fire behind that smoke. So we don't want to do that. But there's some cases where 51% makes sense. If it's the order of bits on a wire and a packet, and the only difference is visual or aesthetics, then who cares? And we'll just literally flip a coin. We've done that a couple of times. Most of the people who don't like it when you get down to flipping a coin, because it comes across bad in the press that you flipped a coin to get this decision. But sometimes that's what's right. Most of the time, though, we're looking for the 80–90% support. But we don't vote either. We don't have a way to vote because we don't have constituency. So we have two ways of judging consensus. The simple way is show of hands in a room. Let's try that. So how many people traveled more than 5 hours to get here? How many people traveled 5 hours or less to get here? So the consensus of the room is that an IETF meeting is more than 5 hours away. Well, we know who said what. So there's times when that's uncomfortable. Let's say you have an opinion and your boss has an opinion and they're different. Now that's an uncomfortable situation. So we have a hum. We've been derided for this, but we have a hum. So let's hum if it took you more than 5 hours to get here. Hum if it took you 5 hours or less. So you know the consensus of the room, but you don't know that he voted different than her. And that's sometimes important. You'll find that quite common seeing a hum, because we don't want to know the absolute number. We want to know the relative opinion. That's what rough consensus is about. It's the relative opinion. If it's about even, then it's not ready yet. We're not ready for prime time yet. We need to keep working. Let's do 222. Now that's in a meeting room. That's in the meeting room. But in the meeting room is not everything, because we got all those people in the mailing list. You can fully participate on the mailing list. So there are no decisions made in the meeting room. That's only a preliminary decision. It's the actual decision has to be validated on the mailing list. Now it turns out that's hard, because a mailing list can be dominated by a fast typist with an opinion, as many people have seen. And so the working group chair's responsibilities to judge the level of consensus. And we've found that to be a difficult thing to do. But that's part of the why we don't pay the working group chairs a lot of money, is that their responsibility to do things like that. Let's see. But the consensus on the mailing list takes into account what happened in the room. If there were 500 people in the room and they all agreed that this is a good idea, the hum was very strong, then if you get 3 people in the mailing list saying it's an awful idea, the room's going to, it's a 500 to 3. It's still going to move on. All IETF documents are open. They're completely open. Anybody can copy them, reproduce them in whole. You can't take it and modify it and then republish it. You can take it as is and publish it. Anybody can do that. You don't have to pay any money. That's both the IETF, that's the RFCs and the internet drafts. They're completely available for anybody to do that. Within the IETF standards process, you can take almost all internet drafts or RFCs, modify them, and then resubmit them as new standards. But it's through the IETF standards process. When you submit a document for publication as an internet draft, you agree to those terms. You say people can use it within the IETF standards process, or that you can also state that they can't. And we have situations where companies want to publish their corporate documentation because they think it'd be useful for the community. And we've got a lot of those cases, but the corporation doesn't want you to modify them. So there's a no derivative works clause you can put in. Most of the time, though, people publish it with derivative works and permitted. And if it's something going to be a standard, then it has to have derivative works permitted. So we have internet drafts, which was the working group documents and general working documents, and RFCs, which are, once published, they never get changed. Completely archival. The format, as of today, is still English. It's still English and ASCII. It's plain text. Now, that's a little tricky sometimes, particularly on the pictures. We have a concept, something called ASCII art, which is trying to draw pictures with vertical bars and minus signs and plus signs and backslashes and forward slashes and up arrows, and it's tricky. Some of those pictures that are in the RFCs, they had to be on really good drugs to get those pictures out. There's some very funky pictures. But we're moving to a different format. We've, for many, many years, been derided for the fact that we can't draw real pictures, and we can't even publish people's actual names if they're not regular ASCII, printing ASCII character names. So we're changing that. We're allowing the main format will be an XML format. They'll still produce the text version, which will be the version that most people will see, but the archival version will be an XML version that can have pictures in it, and it also can have non-English character, non-ASCII characters. But it's taken a long time, but it's been good. There are a lot of standards bodies that adopted Word or PostScript as their documentation standard. There is no current version of Word that can read the versions of the Word documents that were published 20 years ago, 15 years ago, because Microsoft moves on. And we can still read those original documents that were published in 10X and in 1969 and 1970. We can still read those documents because they're plain ASCII, and we can still do that. So internet drafts, that's the preliminary document. Anybody can publish it. And if you look at the internet drafts directory, the archives, you can see that anybody can publish it. There are some very strange internet drafts in there. There's one that claims to solve Fermat's theorem and also has 3 tri-value bits, a bit that can have 3 different values. It's there as an internet draft. I do not expect to be published as an RFC. Anybody can publish an internet draft. And they're all left up there. There is a process why if you think that you've been libeled by an internet draft, you can ask for it to be taken down, or a copyright violation. But other than that, they're there. The internet drafts are random thoughts by an individual, or they're work that's being done at the bequest of a working group. You can tell the difference by its name, and I'll talk about that in a second. But you can publish an internet draft on anything you want. I would suggest doing it on something relevant to the internet, the IETF. But if you want to publish a recipe for funky brownies, go ahead. There's nothing that will stop you from doing that. You might get giggled at, but it's nothing to stop you. All of the internet drafts under default conditions are removed from the main internet draft directory after 6 months or when they've been replaced by a revision. They move into an archive directory, but the idea there is that they're not meant to be permanent documents. They're now, at one point, they were simply removed. But there were other archives around the internet, and when you put something on the internet, it's forever. And so we gave up on trying to actually remove them. But they are moved from the main directory to an archive directory now. Every RFC, other than some very special ones, must pre-exist as internet drafts, because in order to publish an internet draft, you have to agree to the intellectual property rights requirements, such as you're giving the IETF the right to publish this. You're giving the IETF the right to reproduce it and to modify it within the standards process. You agree that you've disclosed any intellectual property rights, any patents or patent applications. And all of those agreements are in there when you publish an internet draft. So you need, in order to be sure that all of those requirements are met for an RFC, all RFCs have to pre-exist as internet drafts. There are some special cases, I'll talk about that. So the name of the internet draft is a key indicator as to what it's about. All internet drafts the name begins with draft dash. If it's your individual internet draft, the next element is your last name, the lead author's last name. If it's a working group document, then the next two elements are, it'll be draft dash IETF dash working group name, and then the topic. If it's just your individual one, it'll be draft dash your last name and the topic. If you're targeting this internet draft at a particular working group, it's useful to put the working group name in the document, in the internet draft name, so that the automatic tools will shuffle it so that it shows up in the list of documents relevant to an individual working group. And then the next piece of the name is a sequence number. Starts with 00 and goes to 99. I don't think we've got to 99 on any revision sequence, but we got to 26 in the BGP protocol before it was published. And then ends with a .txt. These are text files as published. So here's some examples. This is, first one is draft IETF-IDR-BGP4-26. That is the last version of the updated description of the Border Gateway Protocol version 4 before it became an RFC. It took that many iterations and it took many years. And that was because the protocol was changing. They'd find problems and the vendors would change it and then they'd reflect it back in the revision of the internet draft. Draft Bradner-RFC 3979 BIS-06 text is a document that I personally, with the IETF lawyer, have produced, and that's a revision of the IETF's intellectual property rights rules. And we're on the 6th version of that. We're about to publish the 7th version of that. It's not a working group document, it's my individual document, but it's being evaluated by the ISG and the like. And draft IAB RFC format requirements 03 was one of the documents that the IAB published talking about the requirements for the new format for the RFC series. So what's an RFC? It's the IETF archival publications. That's all you can really say. Individual RFCs have different meanings, but overall, this is the archival publication series. It's in the brand name, it's not request for comments. The first one was by Steve Crocker, currently the chair of ICANN in 1969, called Host Software. We have over 7,000 RFCs now. Don't know exactly how many because some of them were never issued. So there's gaps in the numbering sequence. I don't really know how many. Not all RFCs are standards. Some of them are informational, some of them are corporate documentation, some of the earlier ones are meeting agenda, literally, what we're going to have in the next meeting. Some vendors have said, oh, it's an RFC, so therefore it's an IETF standard. That's not quite true. There are many types of RFCs. Here's a few of them. Got standards track RFCs. That's the ones that most people are most concerned with. Obsolete standards, standards which were standards at the time but are no longer considered a good idea. RIP version 1 doesn't work with the current way we assign addresses in the internet, for example. There are requirements documents saying here's how you, if you're building a host, here's what software and functionality you need. Policies, this is how we assign addresses for the internet as the CIDR, for example. April Fool's Day jokes, I'll come back to that. Some poetry. Vint Cerf published a poem about the night before startup. White papers on various different topics. Corporate documentation. As I mentioned, it's, some corporations publish things like Cisco published how they do legal intercept as a public thing so people could look at it and critique it and understand what Cisco's doing in that space. Might be useful in the future for standards work. Some history and some process documents. The IETF process documents themselves. RFC 2026 is how the standards process actually works. And that's it's an RFC. April Fool's Day jokes. This is something that John Postel, who was at the RFC editor at the very beginning, he one April Fool's Day published the Telnet randomly lose option. Now, this was an option you could turn on Telnet protocol that would randomly lose characters. Not the most useful of functions, but for April Fool's Day, it's not a bad thing to do. So he published it as if it was a regular RFC, and that's the whole point of April Fool's Day RFCs. You publish them, and they read like they are really the right thing. They're really a technology standard. One of my graduate students and I published one of those called the Firewall Enhancement Protocol. And what that is, you write TCP IP over HTTP. Get through them pesky firewalls. Bypass it. And we did it approximately right because about half of the email we got on it asked for implementations. Because actually it's a useful concept. And there were implementations. There were quite a few implementations of it. Not quite as inefficiently as we had designed it, but still it's there. Another one that I've got in there is the omniscience protocol requirements. US Senator Orrin Hatch said that he wanted to destroy your computer if you were doing illegal file sharing. And when he was asked, he said, yes, I mean destroy. Well, if he was going to destroy your computer, he had to know that the information that was on it was on there for a bad purpose. So it had to be omniscient. So I wrote a document which described what are the requirements for the omniscience protocol that he would have to use to figure out whether that music file on there was because you stole it versus because you bought it. And I had things in there like it had to work offline, so it had to use wormhole routing and things like that. And about half of the mail I got on that was hate mail because they thought I was in bed with Orrin Hatch, which is an image I didn't want to have. But they just thought it was terrible that I would describe how Orrin Hatch could destroy your computer. But that's the perfect types of things. So those are the types of RFCs. So you just pick up look at an RFC on the mailing on the archive. You can't tell by itself what it is. You have to go look at the index. It may say on the upper left-hand corner of the actual text in the RFC, this is standards track. But you don't know where in the standards track, or you don't even know whether it's been replaced by an update. Because once that document is published, it is not changed. You can't go back in there and change the RFC. It is the way it is. So you have to look at the index to see what its current status is. The IETF used to have a three-stage standards process. It does not anymore. This slide here is to remind you that if you've heard about the IETF three-stage standards process, it ain't there anymore. What we've got is a two-stage. The first stage, which is called, it's a separate standards track called best current practice. They're sort of one-stage standards. And there just says, that's the best way we know how to do this at this point. The standards process documents are BCPs. So that says, well, the best way we know how to make standards is this way. And that the document describes that. But this two-stage standards track for technical standards, the first stage is called proposed standard. Now that doesn't mean this is proposed for a standard. It is a standard at the proposed level. Now that's a document that's gone through the entire IETF process. It's been technically evaluated and checked by the ISG and triple checked here and there and the community and everything else. So that is the equivalent of the output of most standards bodies. You don't actually have to implement it. And in most standards bodies, you don't have to implement their standards, which is why not all of them work. I didn't know not all the IETF standards work. So a proposed standard is something which is, we believe is as good as it's going to be, but we haven't necessarily built it yet. And then the second stage, there used to be an intermediate stage. Now there's a second stage, which is multiple interoperable implementations that this exists. So therefore, we know it works. Now, you might say we have multiple implementations. You might guess that we have the requirement for multiple interoperable implementations in order to ensure that people think it's a good idea. That's not the reason. We want to make it so that if you implement this from the specification, and you implement it from the specification, and the two implementations interoperate, then the specification itself is clear. It's the multiple interoperable implementations requirement is to debug the standard, to make sure the standard is not confusing. And so it doesn't have to have a lot of popularity. You have to have at least two different groups implementing it, but that's all you really need. We have different other RFCs, the informational, experimental, historical. They're historical. The use of the term historical is historical. It should be historic, but that's not what John Postel wrote, so we're keeping what John did. But you do have to check the current index to see what the current version is. They're not changed. RFCs are published by the RFC editor. That used to be John Postel, an individual. He wrote a number of the core documents or edited them, like IP, TCP, all of those original documents, ones that John did. He was very active in the IETF. After the IETF was formed, he was active in internet standards before the IETF was formed. But he was the RFC editor. He's the one who did literally the copy editing and everything else on the documents for a long time. He then gathered a bunch of folks to help him under US government contract and paid. Later on, that evolved into a group at ISI, University of Southern California, ISI, and near LA, near Los Angeles, and they did it for a number of years. Then it was spun off from ISI and taken up as a separate, IETF did an RFP, request for proposals, and selected a vendor to do that. And the current vendor is AMS, the same people that run this meeting. The people in the purple shirts running around are from AMS. And AMS now runs the RFC publication process. There is an RFC series editor. There's a separate person who is hired as the actual editor, who reviews the documents, oversees the editing of the documents. The actual document editing is done by staff at AMS. Then there's an independent submissions process. We'll talk about that separately. These are under the control of the IAB. So the way that the whole process works is the RFC editor function receives a request from the ISG or IAB or IRTF or the independent submissions editor to publish an RFC. They work with the authors to make sure that the document is in the proper format and the text is clear, and then it's published as an RFC. There is an independent submissions editor. John thought this was a terribly important thing. Want to make it so that people whose ideas were not adopted by IETF working groups and other people who just didn't want to go through the process had a way to publish their documents. There's no kind of approval implied by it being published. Doesn't say that this is a good idea or bad idea. It just is being published. It's the independent stream editor, reviews the documents, talks to the independent stream advisory group on some of the documents to say, is this thing relevant to the internet? Is it worth doing? And publishes it. But this is a safety valve. Means that the IETF doesn't dominate saying, you can't publish this thing because we don't like it. It still can be published and get around the tyranny of the IETF, which is what some people think it is. Sometimes there is a conflict that the ISG doesn't think it's a good idea to publish this document, but it's up to the independent stream editor as to whether it gets published. And sometimes it's come down to not blows, but it's certainly arguments. Most of the time, if the Independent stream editors, advisory board thinks it's right to publish, it'll be published, even over the objections of the ISG. So here's the IETF submissions track. I just walked through all of that. The non-IETF submissions, so the independent stream, IAB and IRTF have a different way to feed into the different processes to feed into these RFC editor. So that's some of the mechanism. Now let's move on to what is this other, what is this IETF thing a little bit more. So what's our scope? When I first started, the phrase was above the wire and below the application. It's all that plumbing in between. How the bits get to your computer, how the bits get to other computers, it's the security of them and all of that kind of stuff. All of that core protocols. We divided up between the IETF and the W3C, the whole web stuff, so that the IETF is responsible for the transport, HTTP, of getting the bits to your computer, and the W3C is responsible for HTML, the description of how it should look on your screen. So the IETF deals with the lower layers. But above the wire doesn't necessarily make sense anymore. The IETF has developed protocols in the pseudo wire working group that imitate wires. So you can run an Ethernet over IP. So I can run IP over Ethernet, over IP, over MPLS, over SONET, over ATM, over IP. So now that we've got the wire is now just a software concept, that division is getting a little fuzzy. It's getting fuzzy in other areas too. That the IETF is working on technologies which were traditionally the purview of other standards bodies. The biggest example is telephony, where all the telephony standards came out of ETSI and ITUT, and now an awful lot of them come out of the IETF. The standards that ITUT and ETSI make use of come out of the IETF. The SIP protocol. When we developed SIP protocol, it was a conferencing protocol. We didn't really try to create a voice over IP protocol, but that's what it became. So that blurs the boundary between the IETF and ITU, and between the IETF and ETSI. It blurs the boundary there. And that gets to be very, very troublesome. It gets to be troublesome in that many of these other standards bodies look at IETF work and say, you know, it's pretty good, but it's not right, completely right for what I need. My thing is voice. Voice is the most important thing on the internet. Don't you know that? And so we have to change the internet in order to make voice work. And some other standards bodies, and ITU has done this a couple of times, take IETF technology and then modify it without the involvement of the IETF and try to publish it as a modified right version, correct version of the technology. And that's caused some consternation and some serious arguments between standards bodies. We try and get them to come to us with their requirements for changes. When I was area director, one of the things we did was work out with 3GPP, which is it's a European telecommunications standards group. We said, bring us your requirements, we'll consider them, and if we feel that they're something important to meet, then we'll figure out how to modify our protocols to meet that. So they would bring in a document which is, here's a new protocol. And we said, no, we want requirements. We want to know what problem you're trying to solve, not how you think it should be solved. And once that was worked out, so that we were agreeing on the same terminology, it's worked extremely well. The 3GPP brings us requirements, and we look at it and you say, one of three answers. One answer is, hey, that's a good point. Let's modify our protocols to do that. The second is, we think that's a really bad idea, and here's why. Nobody should do that, and here's why. It breaks the internet, it's insecure, whatever. So the second thing is don't go there, don't do that. The third one is, yeah, it's okay, it's not gonna hurt anybody, but we don't care. Go ahead and do it yourself. And we have those three answers when somebody comes to us with requirements. Here's a picture of the IETF organization as a whole. We'll talk about each of those little areas. The Internet Society, Internet Society was formed in 1992 to be the legal home of the IETF. Of course, the IETF didn't ask for it to be formed. It was formed by Vince Cerf, who was then in the IETF, but the IETF as a whole didn't discuss the idea of creating the Internet Society. So the IETF took many years to agree to come under that umbrella. It wasn't until 1996 that the IETF agreed to become an activity of the Internet Society, come under the legal umbrella. Before that, the IETF said, well, you're just trading off our glory, and we don't need you. Well, actually, the IETF very much needs the Internet Society today, because the Internet Society is where all of the funding and legal structure for the IETF comes from. Even if the IETF is not a legal entity, it's our home. And it's our home in the fiscal sense and in the organizational sense. It's our home. We've got two Internet Society board members in the room. You can see them both back there. Their board met the last 2 days, and some of them are still wandering around. Some of them escaped and went home, but some of them are going to be here for the week. Be sure that you understand that the Internet Society is an important voice in the Internet itself, and making sure the Internet stays open and is a valuable resource for the people who want to use it. And part of its mission is to support the IETF. So it's 103 organizational members when I did this slide. I think it's more now. 71,000 individual members you can join. And in particular, it's got this bunch of chapters, and it's got the organizational members are an important point. If your company does things that the Internet is beneficial to, you can't exist without the Internet. Consider having your company join the Internet Society, because they're the folks that are looking out to make sure the Internet will be useful in the future to support your company's activities. So become an organizational member of the Internet Society. It'll help support the IETF. It'll help support the ISOC's missions. So in 1996, the IETF did agree to come under the legal umbrella of the Internet Society after a very extended working group process. We do our own laundry in our working groups. It's not something that was decided on high. It was done by the community in a working group. So the ISOC is our organizational home, our fiscal home, legal umbrella. The Board of Trustees of the Internet Society has members that are appointed by the IETF. And the ISOC president appoints the NOMCOM chair. We'll talk about that in a bit. The IAB itself is chartered by the Internet Society. And the Internet Society president is on the IAB list. It's also a member of the IAOC. We'll talk about that in a bit. So it's an important function, and do urge support for it. The IRTF, another one of those ovals on that picture, they're looking at long-term prospects. They're looking at things that are not ready for actual standardization. And some of these things are pretty tough. We had a IRTF working group for a long time on spam, anti-spam. Nobody knows how to do anti-spam, so that's a perfect topic for a research group. And all of these other ones are good topics. The ones with a red asterisk are ones that are meeting this week. It's certainly worth going to them and see what it is. And plus, there's an IRTF open meeting. There's one in there that many people might be interested in. There's a proposed human rights protocol considerations research group. What should the developers of protocols keep in mind in terms of human rights? Things like the fact that the protocol should be able to be protected, so it can't be eavesdropped on, or that it can be resilient and can get around censorship attempts. But I don't know the specifics of what that group's doing, but that group is meeting this week, and some of you may find that an interesting group to go to. The Internet Architecture Board, that used to be Internet Activities Board, but got changed around. It still has a real function in the IETF, but its function is really advisory. It's no longer controlling. It provides oversight of a gentle kind, but provides architectural advice as the primary thing. It oversees the RFC editor and the functions in the IANA, which we'll talk about in a sec. But it's sort of our process arm as anything else. It's not the technology arm. It's our overall, it's our relationship group. And it's a step in appeals chain. We'll talk about appeals in a bit. So IAB provides input in working group creation and charter creation, and they hold workshops. They tend to be closed workshops because they're trying to actually get something done. They publish RFCs, the reports on those workshops, wireless, things like that. They publish RFCs that state of the IAB's architectural considerations. If you're going to do this, this is what you could think about. And they do things in programs. Look at the IAB's webpage to see more about that. The IANA. The IANA once upon a time was John Postel, the same John Postel that was the RFC editor. Back in the very early days, it became clear that when you're writing a technology standard, a protocol, you have fields in the protocol that indicate what this particular packet is about. So you have a field which says what protocol it is. It's TCP or UDP or ICMP. Somebody needs to write those down. They don't matter what the number is. There's no vanity numbers. They don't care what the number is as long as everybody agrees on what it is. Another field which is a little higher up in the TCP header that says, well, this packet is email, or this packet is file transfer, or this packet is web. That field has to be recorded. John started recording those values. They're called protocol parameters. So he started doing that. The very early ARPANET, pre-IETF, but still John was doing this, in the old ARPANET, there was a different protocol. It wasn't TCP/IP. January 1st, 1983, the ARPANET moved to TCP/IP. Well, when it did so, you had these IP addresses, and people had to be assigned them. When I needed IP addresses for Harvard, I sent a note off to John Postel and said, I need IP addresses. He sent me back a note and said, okay, here it is, 128.103.0.0, Class B address is yours, is Harvard's. John did that. John recorded who had what IP addresses. And then later on, when it became clear that telling people how to get things using IP addresses was not user-friendly, go get this file from 128.103.8.36. That was the computer sitting on my desk at Harvard for many years. That's going to get wrong, incorrectly interpreted many times, but it also means that if I want to change the computer, I can't do it because the IP address has to be what I told you. So we came up with this abstract layer called the domain name system. Paul Mark-Petras and others came up with that. Paul Mark-Petras and John Postel came up with that. And somebody had to record who was going to be running the databases for each of these layers. The top layer, the TLDs, .com, .net, .org, and the two-letter country codes, that was the domain of the IANA of John. He said, here's who's running the name server, the database for .edu. Not what's in the .edu database, but who's running it. So John was doing all those things, those three basic functions: protocol parameters, IP address assignments, and domain top-level domains. John, at one point, decided that he needed to move that out of ISI, out of the US government direct control, into an independent organization. That organization, he proposed an organization, the US government went through some machinations and finally blessed it, something very similar to what he proposed. That is now known as ICANN, Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. That's an outgrowth of John's individual stuff. It's now a $150 million a year company. It's an amazing amount of money you have to spend to replace one competent geek. But ICANN is now running this function. It's in a dynamic state right at the moment because the US government, which has had a contract with ICANN to perform some of these functions, is saying that they might back off under certain conditions. One small part of that is something the IETF still worries about, and that's the protocol parameters. So there's an IETF IANA function, which is protocol parameters. It's the only thing we care about. The IETF is no longer concerned with IP addresses or the domain names, though we we approve RFCs that set aside certain addresses or certain domain names for certain functions. We're not in that business anymore. So that's separately. ICANN does that function through the IANA contract. Each internet draft, each document approved for being an RFC has to have a space in it that says what the IANA should do, like assign parameters or not. Because the IANA consideration section could say no IANA actions needed, or it could say assign these, create this registry and assign these values. So we've talked about area directors and IETF chair and working group chairs and all those sorts of people. How do they get selected? Used to be that they were selected by the chairs. But today, well, even in those days, they were volunteers. IETF doesn't pay anybody anything for being an area director, an IETF chair, a working group chair, document editor. There's no money coming from the IETF for that. That's all money coming from the companies that employ these people, or the people themselves in some cases, where they're independent. And it's a lot of work. An area director is half to 3/4 time job. It's a lot of work. The IAB is maybe a third time. The chair is a full-time job. So the company that employs our chair is dedicating that person to the IETF. That's a big investment. We don't pay anybody. We do have paid staff. The IETF has one staff member. That's the IAD. I'll mention him in a sec. We've had a contract out to AMS, the people in the purple shirts, to run the meetings and things like that, run the phone calls and the like. And the secretariat is those, the people in the purple shirts. That was a result of an RFP, and AMS won it. And there was previously a different contractor. When we first started out, it was CNRI, which is where the co-inventor of TCP/IP, Bob Kahn, worked. Then it moved to another. When the IETF did its first RFP, it moved to one vendor, and then it's now moved to AMS, so to another RFP. There is a IETF administrative support activity, which is when the IETF fully decided that the Internet Society needed to be its financial home. They needed to set up an oversight process that develops and approves a budget for the IETF and figures out where we're going to meet and what hotel and what city we're going to meet in, all of that. That's all done by the IASA. I'm a member of the IASA at the moment. The IASA has no control over the standards process itself at all, just like the Internet Society has no control over the standards process. That the standards process is an IETF area entirely. That's the IASA. Ray is the IASA, is the IAD. He wanders around here. He's our one actual employee. He's actually an ISOC employee, but he's really is dedicated to the IETF. Everybody else is a contractor that's done through RFPs. So the IOC is this 8-member body that looks at the budget and things. And in 2005, the IETF created the IETF Trust to hold intellectual property rights. We don't hold any patents. We hold copyright on the RFCs themselves, even though we published a document that says, here's what you can do, and one of the things you can do is copy them. That sort of thing. So there is a repository to actually own that copyright, and that's the IETF Trust. Owns the domain name, IETF.org, IAB.org, that sort of thing. Any software that's created under contract goes in the IPR, and that goes into the trust as well. So how do we select these folks? Say it used to be hereditary, used to be the chair selected them. Now it's done by the nominations committee. The IETF, the Internet Society president picks a NOMCOM chair, the chair of the nominations committee. That chair then seeks volunteers from the community. And anybody who has been to 3 out of the last 5 physical face-to-face meetings can volunteer to be on the NOMCOM. Want that requirement because we want somebody who has actually been participating in the IETF and knows what it's about to be on the NOMCOM, because the NOMCOM is who's going to select the next group of people. There's a range of 100 and 150 people volunteer each year for this. 10 voting members are chosen. They've formed the nominations committee. They then put out a request for volunteers or nominations for the different slots, the area director slots, the IETF chair slot, the group like that, positions like that. Each of these positions has a 2-year term, so about half of them are up every year. So they put out a call for that. There's a call that went out yesterday to get more volunteers to look at the art area, because they didn't have enough volunteers for that. They're trying again for that. The NOMCOM picks a slate. That slate is given for the ISG, is given the set of area directors they want to pick for the ISG is given to the IAB for approval, and the IETF chair is given to the IAB as well. The slate of candidates for nominees for the IAB is given to the Internet Society Board to approve. Now, in some cases, the approval body says no. They push back on individuals, or they push back on the overall slate, and the NOMCOM has to go back and work out its more. But it's done that way. There's one little tidbit here, is the very first few of these nominations processes, the NOMCOM chair put the names of the volunteers on a little piece of paper and took it down to the local priest to pick names out of the hat. But there have been some people in the IETF who thought that wasn't random enough. Maybe the priest was biased, I don't know, but they thought it wasn't good enough. So one of them came up with this RFC. This RFC describes a very much over-the-top randomization mechanism. When you're saying, I'm going to pick these people on June 14th. So I will take these values, the US national debt, the results of the Spanish lottery, the number of shares sold in this company, and you put these 6 things together, get a random number, and then use that random number to pick the people out of the volunteer list. That's a little overkill, but that shows the level of detail that some IETF people go into. You will see that people on the badges have dots. So I've got a blue dot and I got a purple dot. I'm sure you cannot tell the difference from there, but I will tell you the top one is blue and the bottom one's purple. The blue dot means I'm a working group chair, I'm working group co-chair actually. The purple dot means I'm on the IOC. Those other color dots mean other things. When I was on the ISG, we use a yellow dot, which has a great advantage because it can't be seen across the room. So unless they could recognize you as an individual, they didn't get you because you could actually get across a room without being trapped to do your ISG job. But lots of different dots. And the smileys are, and there was smiley too. Smiley face are people who have volunteered to be nice. Most IETF people are pretty nice if you ask them questions. Some of them have interesting user interfaces, but most of them are pretty nice. But the people with a smiley face have agreed to be specifically nice. So committed to be nice. So if you've got any questions about how anything works here, or just about anything, I'm not sure I could tell you where the bathroom is every time, but most questions you have, ask me or ask anybody else with a smiley face, or in lack of one of those, just ask anybody. But part of any good standards body is an appeals process. You need to be able to say, I was wronged. The working group chair chose against me, but the consensus of the room was in favor of me. Or the working group chair didn't give me enough time to explain my position. Or the ISG turned down this proposal and they shouldn't have. There's lots of different things, different actions that happen that somebody might consider incorrect. So this is an appeals process by which you can appeal that decision. You go back to the working group chair and say, I think you did wrong. And this is what I think you need to do to correct that. The working group chair says, no, I disagree with you, I did right. Then you can appeal to the ISG. And if the ISG sides with the working group chair and against you, then you can appeal to the IAB. And if you think the standards process itself is broken, not the implementation of it, but the process itself, the sequence of things that happen, there's something wrong with the process itself, you can appeal to the ISOC Board of Trustees. There's never been an appeal to the ISOC Board. There have been many appeals at the lower levels, and some 25% or so of appeals succeed. It's not like the arbitration process in business. It's actually a reasonable number succeed. And people are aggravated enough on a perceived wrong. Sometimes they're right, but it was wrong. And the appeal actually works. The last main thing I'm going to talk about is intellectual property rights, not because it's a fun topic, but because it's an incredibly important topic. First, the two areas of copyrights, and the second area is patents. Copyright's pretty straightforward. When you put in a document to be an internet draft, you agree that the IETF can publish it. Under most conditions, you agree that the IETF can use it and modify it and use it in the standards process. You can say no on that latter piece, but you can't put in an internet draft request and not give the IETF permission to publish it, because that otherwise doesn't make any sense. Here it is, but you can't do anything with it. Well, that doesn't make sense. So you have to give the IETF permission. But that's only in a non-exclusive right. You can do anything at all you want to do with that text other than take the permission to publish away from the IETF. So if you put in this protocol, this great pinochle playing protocol proposal, and decide you want to turn it into the Great American or Great Spanish Novel, go ahead and do it. We don't care. You want to take it to another standards body? Go ahead. It's entirely yours. We have no control over it whatsoever. So it's only a non-exclusive right to do publication. Patents are a much different, more difficult thing. All standards bodies have significant issues with patents, where people patent technology, which winds up in standards, and then sue them, people who implement the standards. We want to avoid that wherever possible. And we do that by requiring disclosure. We only can require disclosure of people that participate in the process. By showing up at the meeting, you saw this thing called Note Well Note. You had to click through that in order to register for the meeting. If you sign up for a mailing list, you'll see it as well. And that is a requirement that you say that you will disclose any patents or patent applications that you have or your company has that you know about. If indeed any of them might infringe on a IETF document. So it's up to your individual responsibility to disclose that. The idea is we don't want submarine patents. We don't want patents that pop up after the standard's done. We want to know in advance. Unlike, for example, the W3C, which says you cannot develop a standard which has patents on it that somebody wants royalties or licenses for. We don't have that. We've discussed that a number of times. And the IETF has come down on the side of letting the working group decide. Working group's bright people in working groups. They can decide whether standardizing a technology that has patents on it makes sense. Generally, working groups don't want to do that. They prefer ones where they don't have any known IPR. And I say known because most of the lawsuits occur by people who are not part of the standards process. But the working group can decide that. Other working groups, the only technologies they have patents on them. Like the robust header compression for cell phones. Well, it's for cell phones. People who build cell phones know about patents because they've got a zillion of them they have to deal with. So standardizing a technology and a patent for that environment wasn't a big deal. But we require disclosure. We don't require that you go back to your company and do a patent search. You do require that if you individually know of a patent that implies here, then tell us about it. And do it as soon as you know. Not at the last minute, as soon as you know, you tell us. And then it's up to the working group to decide what to do. And it has to be an individual disclosure unless your company says, all of my patents are available for free. Then you can say, all my patents are available for free, and you don't have to articulate individual ones. Otherwise, you have to tell us about each individual one if you're not going to give them all away, which not everybody does. So that's difficult, but it's extremely important. So if you know any patents, tell us about them. The Note Well Note, I talked to you about that already. It basically describes what a contribution is. If you make any contribution, which is basically any activity that is tried to affect a standards process, then you have to disclose any IPR you have. If you're not making any activity, you're sitting there with your hands on your hands and you're not doing anything, then you don't have to. More information for newcomers can be found on the IETF homepage. There is a mentoring program. You should, if you want to be mentored, you can go to this URL and there's a mentoring process by which old-time IETFers will help newcomers. There's a desk out here, the mentoring desk out here as well. Today, there's newcomers, which is where you are today, right now. So you didn't go to the tools for creating IDs and RFCs or the Yang tutorial, which happened at the same time. But in 15 minutes, you got the Internet Area Overview and some other things. At 4 o'clock, there's a newcomers meet and greet. It's free booze. And you get the working group chairs and the IESG members, the IAB members all come to that. And so if you've got a particular working group you're interested in, you can probably find the chair there to talk to them about that technology. And then there's a welcome reception at 5 o'clock that's not free booze, but it's you find the whole IETF community there and you can talk to them. It's a interesting thing. Then you've also got a voluntary, if you're interested in it, there's a newcomers dinner that's on Monday night. You meet at the IETF registration desk, but send email to Noreen in advance to let her know you're coming. You walk to some reasonable priced restaurant nearby. What's next? Join the mailing list if you're not already on there. Participate. Go to the microphone when you have something intelligent to say. Don't go and say something stupid. Well, some people will do that and you'll observe that, but try and say something bright. Read, contribute. We need you. We need your help to make the standards better. Don't settle for second rate. Make the IETF standards the best they can be. And I ran over, and the people that are going to be doing the next stage are probably hanging outside the door. So I don't have time for questions, but find me if you have questions. And have a great week.